Hello, and welcome to the fifth episode of the Bitcoin Hour. I'm Dave Bradley. Today, we're going to be talking about how Bitcoin fixes the housing market. But before we get into that, I wanted to just mention that we're going to be having these episodes up on Rumble here very soon. And I'm going to post a link below. I don't fully trust Elon that my speech will be protected and will continue to be free on X. And so we're putting them up on another free speech platform as a hedge to that. So I hope you follow that link. Go and follow us on Rumble. I think there's a lot of growth going on over there, and we're definitely excited to be a part of that. So yeah, let's get into it. I got this question a few times recently in terms of how Bitcoin fixes things. The answer to this is a little bit different. You'll notice that a lot of the time the answer to how Bitcoin fixes something is simply that the government is currently screwing things up. And when we remove their ability to fund whatever it is that they're doing that's currently screwing things up, when we remove their ability to fund that through money printing and inflation, inevitably market forces take over and the situation improves. And that's true for virtually everything in the world. And we can talk through how that affects housing. We'll get to that at the end. But housing is a little bit unique in that there's more than one way that Bitcoin can fix what you might call our housing crisis right now, our housing affordability crisis, at very least in North America. And so, I grew up, I'm an older millennial. I grew up hearing from my parents and people of that generation that a house was a very good investment. And I think that has kind of muddied the waters on what a house actually is and why we need them. And that's driven a lot of what, we would call that affordability crisis in housing right now. So ultimately what's going on now is that throughout most of, the last 40, 50 years, our currency has been in a state of ever rapid depreciation, right? It's no longer doing the core function of what our money is supposed to do. The main thing that money is supposed to do is store the value that you create with your time so that you can use it later. And ultimately, because that's not working as well as it's supposed to, because they're printing so many dollars are no longer functioning as an effective form of money, and people are finding other things to put their money into. And circling back to housing and what we've all been told, that it's this great investment, it's really the first of many examples of this confusion that has been going on between the term investing and the term saving. What I described there, wherein you might want to take your money or the value that you have earned that is represented by your money and store that to use it later, that store of value is supposed to be the core thing that money does, right? And when that starts to fall apart, all the other aspects of money inevitably start to bleed into other elements. People start using other things as money, and housing is a prime example of that, right? So people believe that what they're doing is making this good investment, but in reality, all they're doing is attempting to save value in a way that can't be debased by the money printing. And so that's driven an awful lot of money into the housing market and really fueled what I would say is most of the price of housing in any large North American city, most all over the world, most of the price of housing is currently driven by speculation. And that is ultimately people who are trying to save their value, who've been told that, and very rationally told that if you don't put your value into something other than fiat currency, into your dollars or whatever your local currency is, that your purchasing power is going to decline. And so people have started to put their money into things like housing, collectibles, really anything that can be provably rare and that can hold value over time. Even used vehicles in the last couple of years have started to hold their value better than dollars, which is an absolutely crazy idea. And so as a first step, moving back to a form of money that can actually store value will pull all of that monetary premium away from housing. So right now, people are willing to pay extra for the house as compared to what they would just pay to be willing to live there. They're willing to pay extra because it also provides a store of value for that stored time that you're essentially trying to bank, right? So That part I think is pretty straightforward. You remove the necessity of finding somewhere to park your money. You give people an option as to where they can store their value without it having without having exposure to that debasement, and inevitably the value will move, into a better form of money that we all think is Bitcoin at this point, away from housing. And so that's the first way. That's pretty straightforward. The flip side of that is kind of the same answer as everything else. It's the fact that not only is the government driving this value into housing, the government is actually actively spending the value that they steal when they print that money in a way that makes the housing crisis worse. They're driving housing prices up because their incentives don't align with the incentives of the people who want to use houses, right? And now we're seeing all these initiatives all over Canada. I know they've gotten really bad in British Columbia, for example, wherein you have these absolutely insane regulatory barriers that come between someone and the ability to build a home. And so the government's spending of their money that they've stolen is actually making the supply of housing go down. It's keeping the market from responding to the demand for housing. And that's with all these environmental mandates and different regulations that need to be followed. And the fact is that it's a very long and arduous process to build just about anything. It's hard to get anything started, whether it's a business, building a building, building a house. You can't really do much of anything in the economy these days without asking for the government's help and or permission. And in most cases, the things that the government mandates that we need are not at all the same things that we actually need, or that the market would choose. Right? Like there's a case to be made that we want energy efficient homes because we want to spend less money on energy. And that's the kind of thing that the market should reward if there's enough of a benefit to having an energy efficient home, right? But the fact is the market is not being allowed to respond, and instead respond to the desires of the government. And inevitably, that leads to fewer homes being built and further drives up the price of housing. So essentially, those are the two main ways that Bitcoin will fix the housing crisis. I expect that in a Bitcoin standard, we're going to be in a world where lending is entirely different, right? In a lot of ways, credit markets will dry up significantly, but collateralized credit markets, like you have with a mortgage, will actually thrive under a Bitcoin standard. And so I expect that there will still be access to credit to buy housing, but that houses will move a lot closer to what you might call their utility value, right? It's very useful to have a place to live, and people are willing to pay for that, of course. And the market will inevitably end up pricing those places to live in a much more accurate way. And so that is how Bitcoin fixes housing. And we're now 8 minutes into this video, and I'm just gotten word from our news desk that unfortunately the government has stolen the remaining 52 minutes of this hour, just like they have with everything else. And so that is all you get for today.